Hey, everybody. I have a great show this afternoon, and I have a young lady who wrote me a couple of weeks ago, and she was telling me about her Beatles research, and she's 13, and her name is Kaitlyn. And we had a Zoom call going back, what, about a week ago, Kaitlyn?
Yeah, I think so.
About a week ago. And she took me through her discoveries and her findings, and it was very, very impressive. So I said to Kaitlyn that come on the show. Let's talk and let's have her present her information to our audience. So before we get started, Kaitlyn, tell me a little bit about, and the audience, how you got into the Beatles research, because it's not common for somebody your age to be looking into the Beatles.
Yeah. Well, my parents have always impressed upon me to think for myself and not to believe everything that I read, see, or hear, and to always ask questions and to challenge official narratives, no matter who they come from. So my parents have exposed me to a lot of what's going on in the world. People like Jordan Maxwell and Fritz Springmeier, Mark Passio, Dr. John Coleman, and many others. And of course, Mark Devlin, where I came across your work. I was really actually inspired by all the research you have done on the Beatles and Paul is Dead. And so I started to look up things for myself and I began making my own connections. And here I am sharing some of my findings with you. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited too. And interestingly enough, I have a show that's coming out on the 9th, and we're going to talk about the Ashers. So,
Oh,
so I know that you have been looking into that as well. So it was one of those synchronistic moments where you came forth, and then Dom and Chris from the Sheep Farm, excuse me, podcast presented their material. So it's good stuff. Anyway, so I know you have a number of topics, 10 in your outline that you wanted to
yeah.
discuss. Speaking of the Ashers, did you want to talk about the Elliott family first?
Well, actually, yes. The last time we talked, I hadn't done as much research, but now I did more research on the mother's background because I was listening to the show that you did with Mark Devlin a little while ago, and he's right when he says that most of the mothers are descendant from royalty. And so I did some research, and Margaret Elliott was born to Edward Granville Elliott, who was the younger brother of the seventh and the eighth Earls of St. Germains. So the Elliott family home base is Port Elliott Estate in St. Germains, Cornwall. And her uncle was educated at Charterhouse and Exeter College in Oxford. And Charterhouse was an affluent school built by the Lucas brothers, who also built the Royal Albert Hall and Covent Garden. And Covent Garden is where Freemasons Hall is in England. So Charterhouse was home to multiple notable alumni, including Jack Whittingham, who was a James Bond screenwriter, and most of the Genesis band members, including Tony Banks and Peter Gabriel, Anthony Phillips, Mike Rutherford, and Chris Stewart. Also, Peter Grant, the manager of Led Zeppelin, the third Earl of Liverpool, and the 11th Earl of Westmoreland.
Okay.
So Montague Elliot became a gentleman usher to King Edward VIII and to George V. He was a groom in waiting for King Edward the Ninth and George VI and Queen Elizabeth II. In 1923, Montague was appointed a member of the Royal Victorian Order, which was a dynastic order of knighthood established by Queen Victoria. The symbol of the order is the Maltese cross with a crown in the middle. And the Maltese cross is the highly occulted symbol meaning protection and was used as a symbol of certain orders of the military.
Okay, very good. So you're drawing it back to what Mark talked about and what Dom and Chris will also talk about,
Yeah,
back to these bloodlines and these families.
exactly. And it was interesting to me too because this school that her father was educated at was also the school where the James Bond screenwriter went to and where most of the band members from Genesis went to. So they're all connected.
Very interesting. So where did you want to go to next, Kaitlyn, in your discussion?
Well, I did a little bit of research on the music schools that she used to teach at.
When you say she, you mean Margaret Elliott?
Yeah, Margaret Elliott. It kind of shows how they're all connected.
Okay, so tell the audience, so we don't jump too far ahead for those that don't know, who is Margaret Elliott?
So Margaret Elliott is the mother of Jane Asher, and she married Dr. Richard Asher, and her sister married Dr. Richard Asher's brother too. Interestingly enough.
That is interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell us a little bit more about Margaret Elliott.
Well, she was a music teacher, and she used to teach oboe to George Martin at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. A few of the notable alumni of that school were Daniel Craig, who played James Bond, and George Martin. And in 1887, the school was moved to a new site and was redesigned by a man named Sir Horace Jones. And this Horace Jones was the president of the Royal Institute of British Architects and was elected architect and surveyor to the City of London. He was also a Freemason, being appointed Grand Superintendent of the Works, and he oversaw the rebuilding of Freemasons' Hall, which was a Masonic gathering place in 1775. Margaret Elliott was also an honorary member of the RAM, which was the Royal Academy of Music. Some other famous alumni from that school are Henry Wood, a British composer, Annie Lennox, and Elton John. The RAM was founded by John Fane, the 11th Earl of Westmoreland, and a French harpist named Nicolas Beauchamp. The Academy received its royal charter with the support of King George the Fourth and the Duke of Wellington, Arthur Wellesley. John Fane was the grandson of a wealthy banker named Sir Robert Child. Throughout his life, Fane was deeply involved in politics and the military. In 1817, Nicolas Beauchamp was entangled in counterfeiting, fraud, and forgery, which led him to be sentenced to 12 years of hard labor and a fine of 4,000 francs, something he avoided by running away. Years later, Beauchamp was involved in yet another scandal when he ran off with a composer's wife.
How does Margaret Asher tie into all of this?
Well, she is an honorary member of this RAM, the Royal Academy of Music, and I wanted to do a little research to see, what it was and what its history was and how it was important.
Okay, it's interesting too. Now, I don't know if it's a coincidence, it might be, but Paul McCartney or Billy, one of his solo albums was titled Ram.
Interesting.
Okay, so what's next?
Well, and then I did some of the research on Jane Asher's movies and TV shows because I thought, well, since she was an actress, there must be some clues about Paul's death and some of the things that she did.
Okay, what TV shows would they be?
Well, so I came across a TV show that she did in 1964 called The Saint. And it's a show that starred Roger Moore, and it was sort of like the precursor to James Bond. So when they found out that he could do that, they decided to put him in the James Bond role too. So she stars in 2 episodes in the second season called The Noble Sportsman and The Invisible Millionaire. And those episodes are episode 17 and episodes number 22. Now, the interesting thing about that is she was 17 when she met real Paul McCartney, and she was 22 when she broke up with Billy. So it's almost as if it's chronicling the whole time that she was with the Beatles.
Okay, and there's more to it, right? Because you're going to tell us a little bit about each one of those, well, those 2 shows, 17 and 22, right?
Yeah. So 17, The Noble Sportsman, is sort of almost about the intent to kill Paul because he's not dead yet. The character that represents him is a character named Paul Farley. And this Paul Farley was an architect, a mason. The interesting thing about this show is that he is one of the victims of a plot to get rid of him, but nobody knows of that. Because they believe the good person, this philanthropist, is the one who's the victim of all these death threats. When in actual fact, he's doing this so that he can kill this Farley character.
Okay, and the Farley character you're saying represents Paul McCartney.
Yes.
Biological Paul McCartney.
Well, I find it, the first thing, it's interesting that this philanthropist that everybody believes is the good character, they don't question that. then he's the one who's actually the villain at the end. Now, the interesting thing about this is there's a scene in the show where Jane Asher and her father, who's the philanthropist, they're driving down the road in an Aston Martin DB5, which is the car that Paul McCartney had at the time. And if you take the letters A and M, and then you take 5 from DB5, you get 5 a.m., which is what George Harrison was pointing to on the Sgt. Pepper album.
Where did you get the A and the M from?
The A was from Aston and the M was from Martin. They get into an almost accident with this car. They're driving down the road and there are 2 cars coming at them and they don't see, and then they're driven off the road, interestingly enough. And not only that, but the brakes, the reason of the car crash was that the brakes didn't work and that they couldn't see what was going on.
Okay, so this ties back to the theory or the hypothesis, or some people say it's purely speculation, that Paul McCartney died in a car crash.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the interesting thing, so just keep in mind the character of Paul Farley, because his name will connect to the next character that portrays Paul in the next episode.
Okay.
So the next episode, episode 22, is The Invisible Millionaire. And this one is more about what happens after Paul is already dead. So what they do afterward. It's more about the covert replacement of Paul with Billy. So the interesting thing is, the character who plays Paul McCartney is a man named Mr. Chase. And at the very beginning of the episode, he gets into a flaming car crash at 9 minutes past 11 on the car clock. They don't scramble it. They don't say, oh, 11 minutes after 9, so you have to sort of unscramble it. No, it's 9 minutes past 11 on the car clock.
And this is episode 22?
Yes, episode
Okay.
22. The interesting thing is Jane's character's words to Roger Moore about her father being different since the car crash. She says to him that he's not the same person, and that something has happened to him since he came back. Also, nobody ever questioned if it was really Mr. Chase who came home in the bandages after he came back from the car crash. Everybody thought, well, sure, who else could it be? You know, it has to be Mr. Chase. But in the end, they realized that Mr. Chase was the one who died. And his associate who was in the car with him pretended to be him and came back as him. His face with bandages and, you know, being supervised by a doctor so that nobody would see him for very long. And then they also realized that the car crash was faked at 9 minutes past 11, and that Mr. Chase had actually been shot by Mr. Tamblyn beforehand. So Mr. Tamblyn would have had enough time to pretend there was a car crash and then to pretend he was Mr. Chase.
Okay, so Mr. Tamblyn is the replacement then.
Yes, Mr. Tamblyn is the replacement.
Okay, and they slipped in the 9/11 or the 11/9
Yes,
numbers
exactly.
into the episode. Okay.
Yeah, and it was actually quite a big thing because the whole like that's the reason why they found out it was faked. Because Roger Moore had been thinking if it was 9 minutes past 11, then how could the car crash have happened at 11 o'clock? Because when he spoke to the postman said that the car crash took place at 11. So he realized that there was something up and that there was another 9 minutes that had to have been used doing something else.
Okay, and in that 9 minutes, what were they doing?
In that 9 minutes, Mr. Chase, they had stopped the car and Mr. Tamblyn had asked to drive. So they both got out of the car and then Mr. Tamblyn shot Mr. Chase, disposed of him, and then faked the car crash.
So you're looking at that and you're thinking, well, this has ties into the whole Paul is dead
Exactly.
narrative as
And
well.
the interesting thing, like I said before, was that nobody ever questioned if it was really Mr. Chase. They all thought, sure, that's Mr. Chase. He's the one who died. But they didn't actually realize that it was somebody else pretending to be him.
Okay, so that's what we talk about with the Beatles, right?
Yeah,
As an example, we would say that, well, what I've discussed in the past is when the Sgt. Pepper album came out, and that's Billy on the front cover, a lot of people looked at it and said, well, he doesn't really look like Paul McCartney like we used to know how he looked. He looks different.
yeah.
But the response was, well, if it's not Paul McCartney, then who is it?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody just kind of went with the flow and said, okay, well, that's
Yeah.
got to be Paul McCartney.
Yeah, exactly. Because they didn't know of any other people who that could have been.
Right. Well, the thing is, it's not fathomable to most people. The first response would be, or the reaction would be, well, why would you do something like that?
Well, I was gonna say, I wanted you to keep in mind the character of Paul Farley. So if you take the whole first name, if you just take Paul from Paul Farley, and you take the initials of Marvin Chase, MC, and you put them together, you get Paul MC.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now, let me just ask you this question because I want to be able to try to connect some dots between episode 17 and episode 22. So you said in
Yeah.
episode 17, Paul Farley was playing the Paul McCartney character.
Yes.
Okay. In episode 22, it was Mr. Chase.
Mm-hmm.
So that I can understand this and the rest of the audience, these episodes then were not contiguous. In other words, were they new episodes with new characters?
Yes, there were new episodes with new characters.
Okay, okay,
Exactly.
okay, good.
And the what I was saying before was the reason why Paul Farley was still around then is because it was all about the intent to get rid of him, but they hadn't done it yet. Because she was 17 at that time, or 17 in the episode, and he was still alive then. But after when she was 22 in the next episode, he was already dead and Billy was in the picture. So that's why Mr. Chase dies very early in the episode.
You're thinking that this is foretelling
Yeah,
events that were going to take place.
exactly. And then when she was younger, she did a Disney TV show series of The Prince and the Pauper. The parallels between the prince and there are parallels between the prince and Paul and the pauper and Billy, because to me it seems as if Paul was the prince before and Billy was the pauper, and they after Billy's surgery they looked similar, so they switched places. And now Billy is the prince because he's in the public eye and he's famous and he has the money. Before it was Billy being the pauper because he was unknown. Nobody knew him.
Right. Now, let me ask you a question, Kaitlyn, since you're young, especially relative to me. When you look at pictures of Paul McCartney from 1962 to 66, and then pictures of Paul McCartney after 1966, let's say starting with 1967 and Sgt. Pepper, do you see the same person or do they look like two different people to you?
They look like two different people to me. I never actually saw any pictures of him before we started looking up your research. So then the minute I saw that, I go, yeah, that looks like one guy. And then I looked at another picture and said, that looks like another guy. Because I'd never seen him before. But then when I looked at it, I said, that's not the same person. I mean, this guy, his face is longer. There are a few differences here and there. Like, that's not the same person. He's
You
taller.
He's taller. Yep. He
Yeah.
has a different facial structure. His jawline is longer. He has different ears.
And he might even have that fake eye that you were talking about.
Yep. Well, that's Sally Whitty's. That's her research, and I believe Sally is correct. One of the reasons is because she knows about ocular prosthetics because she has one
Yeah.
herself, and the other reason is because during an interview when Billy was doing the Eyes of the Storm exhibit, he was taking a reporter through the exhibit. He stopped at one picture, and the interviewer said, "Well, you have to have an eye to take a picture like that." And Billy clicked his left heel and said, yes, it's my left eye, meaning that's the eye he has sight in. You're probably familiar with the Masonic technique of massively speaking, where they
Yeah.
tell the truth in an encoded way. So that's what was going on there. Also, the clicking of the heel, this is for the audience. People have asked me about that. When a Mason clicks his heel, and we're talking about the left foot, which is what Billy did in the interview, that's in reference to enlightenment,
Oh,
to
I didn't know
illumination.
that.
Yep. So, in fact, I had an exchange with Sally yesterday about this. We talked about it a little bit. Yeah, I just wanted to get your perspective on when you looked at the images, whether you thought, "Oh, yeah, that's the same person," or "No, that's not the same guy."
No, I didn't think it was the same guy because my mother when she looks at it, she's sometimes she thinks that it's kind of hard to tell. Like she says, "Oh, that looks like this. Is that Billy or is that Paul?" But I can look at it and I say, "No, that's Paul. That's Billy. There's a
Okay.
difference."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what happens is like your mom and others who are my age, maybe a little younger, a little older, are so indoctrinated with what has been shown to us over the last 60 years. I refer to it as being jackhammered into our brains
Oh
that
yeah.
it's very difficult for people to discern because what the controllers did, what Tavistock did, was to create a composite Paul McCartney. So if you look at images of Paul McCartney, let's say going back to 1962 or 63, right through today, they don't show the images
Side
as
by side.
side by side as comparisons. They just tell you that's Paul McCartney. When you put the images side by side, and I'm sure you've done this, you can easily tell at some point the guy changed. He's a different
Yeah.
guy, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So I didn't want to derail you there. Anything more about the TV shows? Anything else you wanted to mention about them?
Not really. I know that she did a couple of other movies near the end, like in the 70s, but those clues have more to do with her possible death and replacement.
Yeah. So I think I sent you the presentation from Kat from Supernatural
Yeah.
Beatles. And Kat did a very nice job of taking a look at Jane Asher and asking the question, was she swapped out as well? Now, I don't know if Kat, because I watched it a while ago, whether she makes the case that she's not with us anymore or that she was just replaced. In other words, she's still
Well,
alive, but replaced. What do you think?
she kind of leaves it open to speculation. She says she might have been killed and replaced, or she might have been replaced and just put somewhere else. But I mean, more of her evidence that she shows you, it's sort of stronger that she was replaced and
Yeah,
killed.
yeah. I thought that she was replaced as well. It's tough to
She,
say that somebody was killed because we don't have any direct evidence that
yeah,
somebody was taken out, but we do have a lot of evidence when we look at the images where we can discern that in all likelihood is not the same person.
it would be more of a hassle for them to replace her and then give her another life and give her another name and give her money and give her a job and whatever when they can just, well, to them, they would rather just get rid of it, finish it off.
Well, the old saying is dead men don't talk, right? So
Yeah,
if you're not here anymore, then you can't pop up and
exactly.
disrupt the plans. So I don't know, but I thought that Kat's presentation was very good, and I wanted to share it with you because based upon our last discussion when you talked about Jane Asher, I thought it might be of interest to you.
Yeah,
Where did you want to go to next? I know we have the James Bond connection as well. Did you want to go
yes,
there?
yeah.
Okay.
So, the same car in the Noble Sportsman that they used when they had that almost car crash, they used the same Aston Martin DB5 in James Bond. It went on to become the signature James Bond spy car with all of the glamour and the gadgets and the this and the that. And it first appeared in Goldfinger. Now, gold in satanic mind control programming, gold is the color of Lucifer because it's said that Lucifer appears in a shower of gold. So when they talk about Goldfinger in the song by Shirley Bassey, they're talking about the character, but they could also be referring to Lucifer too. Just like in the Phantom of the Opera when they sing Angel of Music. Lucifer in God's heaven was considered the angel of music. So they could possibly be invoking Lucifer when they sing that song.
Yes, that's exactly right. Lucifer was known as the angel of music.
Now, the actor Roger Moore, who was Simon Templar, went on to play James Bond. And his first film was Live and Let Die. And in Live and Let Die, his leading lady was also named Jane. And Jane Asher had played a Jane Seymour previously in King Henry and His Six Wives. In his first James Bond movie, they're bringing her back. It's almost like they're saying, you're starting something new, so you need to have Jane and Paul beside you, which is why Billy and the Wings sings the theme song for the movie.
Okay, very good. What else?
Well, and then there's the symbolism behind them burning the cello in the Blue Jay Way music video.
That was very interesting when you described it to me.
Yes,
Yeah.
you were talking to Sharon Clemens when she brought it up, and she said that burning these instruments, the cello and the piano, signified ritual sacrifice. And so that's very true. But now, what we'd like to find out is why they burned a cello and a piano. I mean, yes, a piano is a more common instrument, but a cello, why would they burn a cello? They could have burned a saxophone or something, or a drum. And it was very interesting to me because I'm a cello player myself, so I was kind of intrigued by that.
Okay, so why did they burn the cello?
Well, I was looking up the Chinese lunar calendar, and the Chinese lunar calendar goes by birth year. So whatever your birth year is, like my year is 2011. So anybody who was born in 2011 has this symbol or that symbol or whatever. So the symbol of Paul's birth year, 1942, in the Chinese lunar calendar is the water horse. And the water horse comes around every 60 years. So in the orchestra, there are four sections, and they mirror the four elements, excluding spirit. So they're their earthly representation of the four elements. The string section of the orchestra represents water because it often sounds smooth like ripples of the sea, and it carries the melody, and it often invokes a lot of emotional expression. And the wind instruments are the air because they function with air and they make all of the light bird sounds. And the drums are the earth because they hold the orchestra together. They make it sound fuller. They make the harmony. And then there's the brass, the horns, which are the fire because they're loud and bombastic and full of life. So now the string section represents water, as I said, and it is the same element as his Chinese lunar sign. Now I was thinking, well, if it's the same element, then which of the strings is most like the horse? The cello seems to be most like the horse because it gives off like a proud and regal, majestic look. You know, it's big, it's wild, it's strong. It's not like a violin or a viola that they're small. It can hold its own melody, and it's somewhat of an ancestor to a guitar or a bass guitar because it usually plays the background melody. So a cello is sort of like the representation of Paul's birth year sign, the water horse, which is why they burn it before ascending the ladder. And when they burn him, when they burn it, they burn him and his sign.
Now, when you're talking about fire and burning, and this is about ritual, do you know about when John Lennon had said that the Beatles were bigger than Jesus? I'm paraphrasing there.
Yes.
Okay. So when he said that in the United States, it caused a big ruckus. And what happened was groups had gotten together to burn the Beatles records. So the whole process of burning is ritualistic.
I found that this cello is like a representation of his birth year sign. Now, the other strange thing is that in the Chinese lunar calendar, 1966 is the year of the fire horse. It's the third horse since 1942. So I was thinking, well, that's strange. He's born on a water horse and he dies on a fire horse. So the fire horse is associated with rebelliousness and being headstrong. And because of this, a fire horse is an evil sign to the Chinese and the Japanese. The 1966 fire horse year is almost like the year of death because the fire horse is a powerful essence that in Asian cultures is usually harnessed for destruction. The 1966 fire horse's lucky number is 9 and its lucky color is black. And because of the great fear of fire horses in Asian cultures, birth rates in 1966 went down 20% because couples either avoided having children or they chose to have abortions. There is this superstition, actually, that women born under the fire horse have a strong temper and may bring misfortune to their husbands. And in these cultures, being born under a fire horse is a perceived curse. And the 1966 year of the fire horse is the most recent year. There hasn't been another one yet.
As you're talking, I'm thinking in terms of the fire horse possibly representing Set, Typhon, the gods of destruction. What happens with Set? He winds up battling Horus, and it's the battle between the dark and the light. The point I'm trying to make here is Paul's death could represent that transition point from Set to Horus, because in the memoirs of Billy Shears, we're told that Billy represents the Horus or the savior character. I'm just throwing that out there for the audience just to chew on a little bit. Okay, what else you have?
Well, then I did some research behind the persona of Ringo Starr.
Oh, okay.
Because, yeah, and people might think, and even I thought, why would Ringo Starr be important? I mean, he's nothing really happened to him. But to be honest, I found that if you just look at him, like his name and his instrument and what he wears, it's almost as if you can find out the whole ideology behind the Beatles.
Interesting. So tell us about that.
So we know that his name represents Saturn because Saturn is the star planet and the rings go around it. And Saturn is Lucifer's planet. So we can say that Ringo Starr means Lucifer. So his name represents that. Now Ringo is in charge of or represents or is in control of the drums in the band. Now, as I was telling you before, the orchestral section of the percussion represents the earth. So it's almost as if they're saying, as Ringo controls the drums or is in charge of the drums, Lucifer plays the earth or is like in charge of it or controls it somehow. But the really strange thing now is his rings, because he's always the one wearing rings. Nobody else is wearing rings. It's just him all the time. And he wears rings on his pinky finger. And the wearing ring on your pinky finger is a sign of the Brotherhood of the Freemasons, because they believe it to be a symbol of loyalty. They also believe that the pinky finger is the first finger because it is controlled by the planet Mercury, and Mercury is the first planet. This goes back to ancient witchcraft, where witches put moonstone and amber and citrine on their pinky fingers so they could harness the rays of Mercury. Mercury is also considered the planet of Lucifer to the ancients because it was usually associated with trickery and communication. So Mercury is believed to be a messenger of evil spirits. But not only is Ringo wearing just a plain ring, it also has a black square on it. And this black square, we know, is the symbol of mind control and, prison of the mind, being trapped in base consciousness. And you can see it quite clearly on the Please Please Me album and the picture where they're all holding the umbrellas. He's wearing one on either pinky then. And so if you kind of put that together, it's basically saying that Satan or Lucifer, his name, is in charge of the earth, which is his drums, and that the Beatles are mind controlled by occultists to be messengers of evil spirits, because that's what occultists are. They're messengers of evil spirits, which is why they wear the ring on the pinky finger.
On the square could also represent the cube, which goes
Yeah,
back to Saturn as well.
I had did done some research on the colors that the Beatles wore on the Sgt. Pepper album.
Okay, this should be interesting.
Yeah, because we when I look at the Sgt. Pepper album and we go into all of the clues, all of the dead people behind them, the clues in the area in front of them and the drum head. But the colors that they're wearing too are just as meaningful as all the rest of the album. So George wears red. And in satanic mind control programming, they love red because red is the color of rebellion and of rage and passion, rebellion against traditional values, shaking things up. Ringo wears pink. In color mind control programming, pink means obedience. It means mind control or the literal act of turning boys and girls into robotic, mindless people. And John wears yellow. Yellow or gold is the true color of Lucifer, which is why gold is so valuable. Yellow represents somebody who is scared or frightened of the path he is on, and someone who has gone off course and needs redirection to use his intelligence and willpower to follow Lucifer's path, the yellow brick road. And that sounds like John, doesn't it? Because he's the one who is going off course, which is why there's an expression where when you're scared, they call you yellow because you don't want to do anything, you're hesitant. You need redirection, which is sometimes why when some celebrities go off course and they need a warning, they come back with like a yellow wig or a yellow hair, something like that, because they're being reminded that they have to stay on course, they have to go this way instead of that way and not branch out.
Also, on the Beatles' first album, Please Please Me, and again, for the audience, the Beatles' official releases were their UK albums on the Parlophone label. The very first album, Please Please Me, which was released on March 22nd, which is 322, is the Skull and Bones number. It also relates back to Genesis 322, so take your Bibles out and take a look at that passage. But the album, the label was referred to as the Black and Gold album, and black and
Mm-hmm.
gold are the colors of alchemy. Okay, so I'll just throw that in there.
And now Billy wears blue. In this mind control programming, the Satanists believe that the blue is connected to the planet Jupiter and that it's associated with protection. So blue is the color of leadership and Jupiter is the king of the planets. So they believe that wearing blue means that you're in charge, you're the king, you're the most important, you're the greatest.
And I guess we could say that Billy kind of fits that mold
Yeah, yeah, that's what they believe.
because when he entered into
Because
the picture, he became the de facto leader of the band, right?
yeah, and he's supposed to be, the Jesus, the savior, whatever.
Yeah, it goes back to the whole Horus set Egyptian mystery and mythology that permeates a lot of the narrative around Billy in the memoirs of Billy Shears. Okay, so did you want to talk a little bit about some of the early movies, especially Help?
I didn't do too much on A Hard Day's Night because it seemed to be just like a regular day in the life for them, so there wasn't really much to pick out. I mean, there
Yeah.
were a couple of scenes that had strange appearances of cellos. There were cellos where there shouldn't be a cello. It was very interesting, but Help, I think, is the more important one. In some respects, because there are a lot of strange coincidences, if you want to call them that. And the storyline is very interesting. Now, the producers of this movie said that, oh, of course, this is fictionalized, it's not true. But to be honest, I believe that is probably just as true as the first one, It's about an Eastern cult, and at the beginning, they're about to sacrifice a woman to their goddess of destruction, Kali, but they find out that she's not wearing the sacrificial ring, and they set out to find who is. Whoever's wearing this ring has to be sacrificed to the goddess. And of course, Ringo not knowing what the ring was, received it in his fan mail, and he puts it on. So that's sort of like a huge spotlight on his wearing all these rings all the time. So it's all about this demonic cult being after them because they want to sacrifice one of the Beatles before dawn, and their attempts to try and remove the ring from Ringo's finger.
Yeah, so we're back to the narrative containing sacrifice.
And it really sort of introduces the fact that they're intertwined in this. Because I mean, if you think about the song Help, it's all about the fact that they've lost their independence and they need help to get out of some sort of trap that they're in. And this is the trap. And they're showing you because they realize that it's closer to Paul's death now because this is 1965. So they're thinking, well, we got to kind of tell them a little bit. We have to make these things more serious now. The coincidences that I was talking to you about, there's one scene where they find out the entire thing that's going on, this demonic cult being after them and whatever. They're in an Indian restaurant, which relates to their later years where they're in with this Indian, they go to India and George becomes this like Indian guru who loves Indian music. And, they start talking about all the poor in India and they go there to meditate and whatever. Now, there's a scene where they ask for soup and the waiter goes into the kitchen to spoon out the soup. And in one scoop, he gets granny glasses in this scoop and he puts it in the bowl and then he gives it to John. And John's gonna eat the soup and he takes the spoon out and there are granny glasses on the spoon. And he says to the man, "What's this? Glasses?" And then the man is very vague about it. He doesn't really reply. But the interesting thing is that he's getting the glasses showing you that that's what he's going to be like. He's going to need them afterward. Why would there be glasses in somebody's soup, especially John's? Like the minute I saw those glasses there, I said, I bet you John's going to get that bowl. And he did.
Yeah, and the whole Eastern religion piece of it goes back to Blavatsky and to Aleister Crowley. So there's ties there as well. In fact, the counterculture in the 1960s, one of their paths was to draw more people to the Eastern religions and away from the traditional religions like
Exactly.
Catholicism and Christianity and so on.
Yeah. And it's sort of like predictive programming because there's another scene where they're all disguised because they have to go on a plane and they don't want to be recognized. And they look exactly like they're going to look after Paul dies. They have the long hair, they have the beards, they have the granny glasses. They look exactly like they're going to look after everything happens. So it's already telling you that this is what they're going to be like after all this is over.
Little predictive
Exactly.
programming. Yeah.
And it's just a little bit of a dialogue when Ringo goes into the Indian restaurant and he says to the man, he says, "Do you know what this ring means?" And the guy goes, "Well, sure, Freemason." So it sort of really just wants to tie everything in and mention the Freemasons and mention the Eastern cult and mention what they're going to look like afterward and the sacrifice and the ring and everything.
Yeah, that's very astute of you, Kaitlyn, to pick up on all those little clues and things that they were inserting into the movie. So let me
Yeah.
ask you, how long have you been researching alternative research and conspiracy research? Because you're very, very intuitive.
There wasn't really a date because my parents sort of knew about things back when they were younger, and my father was looking into chemtrails, and my mother used to work for a pharmaceutical company, so she knew, what they put in all those drugs and all those vaccines and how they're trying to kill people with those things. So they started looking into all these people, and I kind of grew up with it almost.
Okay, well, it's good because you're free thinking and you're critically thinking. And as you mentioned in the beginning of the show, you're not just taking official narratives and soaking them in and taking it on and
Yeah,
believing all that stuff. You're questioning everything, which is what we need to do. We need to question everything, especially when you become aware of certain topics that you used to believe in and you realize that you have been lied to, that there's a
Mm-hmm.
deception. Then you have to ask yourself the question, well, if they're lying about this, what else are they lying about?
Exactly. Because my parents at first were brainwashed like every other person, and they believed in politics and they believed in this and that. But then they finally started waking up about these things and they said, well, wait, if this is wrong, then maybe that's wrong, and maybe this is wrong, and maybe that's not true.
Right? Now, let me ask you as a young person, what kind of music do you listen to?
Well, I don't really have a favorite artist, but I do like a lot of 50s stuff like Frank Sinatra, things like that. But I listen to Journey and Culture Club, and I'm sort of like mixed because I listen to Michael Jackson and I listen to George Michael, and I listen to Ella Fitzgerald. So and I listen to classical music, to Bach and Beethoven and Handel. So I don't really have a genre.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this question then. When you listen to the pop music that you listen to, how do you listen to it? Do you listen to it with a full understanding of what it's really all about?
Yes, I listen to it and I know I understand what it's about because my mother told me, and I believe that you don't listen to the music because you idolize the artist. You just listen to it because you like it, because you know what's behind the person and you know what's behind the music and all those things. So you only listen to it because you enjoy it. You don't listen to idolize the person because you know that they're not good people or
Okay.
they're involved in something, or they were misled, or they were thoughtless and they decided to get into this, or they were marked from birth to do this.
In other words, you're not listening to them and viewing them as an influencer in your life. In other words, they're going to lead you down a certain path or,
Mm-mm.
right. Good. Very good.
I know that's what happens to like a lot of things happen to people when they do that, when they listen to all the later Beatles stuff, or maybe they listen to the Doors and they decide, let's go get some drugs, let's go get high because we have to follow what Jim Morrison is doing or what whoever else is doing, whoever we like.
Well, I can tell you from experience, having done the Beatles work for 8 years, that it's amazing to me how many people do idolize them to the point where they're emotionally attached to the
I
band
know.
or to the artist, and they have a lot of difficulty shaking it. Now, when you think about it, the bands are comprised of people they don't even know. They don't even know these people,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
which is kind of weird itself. But then again, I was so invested in the Beatles myself that I'm not one to talk really. I mean, the only thing I could say is that I broke the programming going back to
Yeah.
2016, and then, now I have a completely different perspective about not only what the Beatles were all about, but all of these bands.
Some people are so mind controlled that they see, like they say that total horrible songs like Revolution 9 are wonderful.
Revolution number nine is a form of avant-garde type of art. And you're right. I mean, they will listen to just about anything that we'll pick on the Beatles because this is our topic that comes from the Beatles or even their solo careers, and just
Mhm.
say it's great, even when, like you said, it's not great. If you're objective
Yeah,
and you listen to some of the stuff, you'll think to yourself, well, you know what, that's not really a great song. But there are people that will defend it to the hilt. They just feel they have to. They feel that that's their job, their responsibility because of their level of investment into the Beatles, either as a band or individually, going
yeah.
into the solo careers. It's amazing. So, do you get a lot of flack from friends or anybody else
Well,
when you
to be
talk about this stuff?
honest, I don't have many friends actually.
Oh,
I
welcome to
don't
the
have
club.
many friends because I'm homeschooled. So when my mom took me out of school because they wanted people to get vaccinated with all this COVID junk, and It was just terrible. So she pulled me out of school, and now the only friends that I have, I see in extracurricular activities. And they're not really friends, they're just acquaintances. So I
Gonna have,
haven't actually really talked about this to anybody except my family and my brother because I don't have anybody to talk about it with.
how old is your brother?
He's 11.
He's 11. So where is he with this type of research? Is he aware of it yet, or is he
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
not
he's
there?
he's aware of it because we all share all our ideas and everything that we found out. Just like me, he grew up in the family where we were questioning the narratives and we were doing our own research. So he's with it definitely.
Well, let me just say this, very good on your parents for homeschooling you and for ensuring that you're on the road that you're on as early on as it is. I mean, at 13, for you to be looking into this type of information, not just the Beatles, but other topics and
Yeah,
other,
I know
yeah,
I know quite a lot of things.
I can tell. I can tell. And it's excellent. I wish more parents spent the time to do what your parents are doing for you and your brother.
Yeah, I guess we're a little different from the average TikToker.
Yeah, well, I would say you're very different in a good way, in a very good way. So, Kaitlyn, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Well, yes, there were some interesting coincidences about John's murder in the older songs, the newer songs. I mean, like the songs from the Billy period.
Okay,
Because to me, it seems like there was a period of time, like 64, 63, where there wasn't really anything. And then in 65, 66, there started to be, a couple of things here and there about clues of Paul's death and songs. But then I think it really blew up after 66, like in 67, 68. They had clues everywhere about Paul's death and on album covers and on this and on that. But I believe too that in 69 there was also a little bit of some clues of John will be dead in some songs too.
okay, well, tell me about that. What
I
clues did you
have a
find?
few I have a few examples. The first one is Come Together, and I'm sure you know that song. I don't know what album that's from, but
From Abbey Road.
I haven't finished deciphering the whole alphabet soup that song is, but I feel to me it's sort of like a recounting or like a telling you of what's going to happen on John's death. Because right at the beginning of the song, right out of the gate, he starts saying shoot me
Right.
like a couple of times, like maybe 4 or 5 times.
Yes.
And then it's all about some sort of man with a gun who's going to shoot somebody. And then in one passage, he says that he shoots Coca-Cola. I don't know what Coca-Cola is, but I'll have to look that up. But there are other interesting parts too in the lyrics. Like one of the times he says he's got juju eyeball, I believe.
That's a reference to Billy.
Yeah, it is, but it could also be like the man has like sorcerer's eyes, like who is a wizard or he has hypnotic eyes or something like that.
Right.
And then there's another sentence where he says he's got walrus gumboot. So he brings up the walrus again, and we know that in I Am the walrus is Paul. I don't know what gumboot is, but it's almost as if he's saying that he's going to be in the walrus's shoes now. He is going to be the one dead, basically. It's almost, or his boots or something. Then there's another interesting, weird area where he sings that he's got oh no sideboard, but oh no with a capital O. So he's not just talking about some like oh no, he's talking about Yoko Ono because it's a capital O. So it's almost as if Yoko is on the man's side or something. I mean, I really don't know, but there's another part, the chorus, where he sings "Come Together Over Me." It's almost as if he's saying that he wants the band to come together over him because he's dead. After he died, he wants them to come together.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. If you dig deeper into it and you piece it together, let me know, and I'll give you an opportunity to present it to the audience.
Yeah.
How about that? There's a quote from John Lennon. I forgot what interview it was in, but I do have it on my hard drive, and maybe I'll try to insert it into the show at the very end, where he says that there's only about 100 people that really understand the Beatles' music. So what he was saying is there's an inner circle that really understands what the lyrics and the clues and everything that goes along with it, what it
Yeah.
was really about. So that was a very interesting quote. And as you mentioned, I think you mentioned it before, where John was, as he was going along, especially in his solo career, he was talking a lot and alluding to that the Beatles were not what people
They said they
believe
were.
they said they were. He in an interview he did back, I think it was in 1971 with Rolling Stone magazine, he said that the Beatles were a myth, Paul McCartney was a myth, Bob Dylan was a myth. So John was saying a lot of things, and of course we've got his song God, where he had a whole litany of things that he didn't believe in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, listen to the song God off his first solo album with the Plastic Ono Band. I don't believe in this. I don't believe in that. And then at the very end, he says, I don't believe in Beatles. So take a listen to that song. You can easily find it on YouTube.
Yeah,
And
and there's another song that he did, another album he did. I think it was the last album he did before he died called Double Fantasy.
yeah, Double Fantasy.
And
Yep.
there's a song there named called Woman
Yeah.
or something, but I don't really believe it's called Woman. I believe it's called Paul because because to me, it's more like a personal message to him because what did Yoko do for him? I mean, he's talking about the fact that he is torn because of his thoughtlessness and that this person showed him the true meaning of success. So I believe it's almost like, he has one last thing to say and he's gonna say it to Paul because he's telling him all of his mistakes and the fact that they should have been smarter and all those things like that.
So you think he camouflaged the lyrics, made people believe it was Yoko, but he was really referring back to his relationship with Paul.
Yeah, I think so.
Very interesting.
Well,
Well, he also has a song on his Imagine album titled How Do You Sleep? And
yes,
and it is
yes.
the quintessential Paul is Dead song. And I've said to people over the years, if you read memoirs and then listen to How Do You Sleep, or listen to How Do You Sleep and then read memoirs, you're going to see that the lyrics to the song and the book are integrated.
Yeah.
They
And
map.
there's actually a part where he says something like, "The only thing you ever did was yesterday. Now
Right,
you're just another day."
right.
And Another Day is a song by Billy and the Wings,
Yes.
and it's about a lady who's waiting for her lover to come back, but he never comes back because something detains him. And it's almost as if, you could keep it as a lady, but you could also switch it and put in the Beatles waiting for him to come back, but he never does. Or he comes back as someone else.
Many times the lyrics to songs are not as straightforward as
Mm-hmm.
people believe that they
Yes,
are. It's what they refer to as being layered. So you have to peel back the layers and to see if there's another message embedded in the music,
exactly.
right? Anything else? Any last thoughts?
Yes. There are a few people on YouTube who do backmasking videos where they play all the Beatles songs in one album backwards so you can hear what they're saying. And there's one part in the Abbey Road album. And now the weird thing about this is that Yoko sings with them in this song. She actually gets to sing in the song, and I'm like, why is Yoko singing in this song? It's the same reason why Linda is always around when Billy's there. Like, why? Why is that? Why is she always there? And so this backmasking piece was Yoko Ono's voice because it wasn't the Beatles' voice. You could hear it was a woman. And she kept saying, I shot John Lennon, I shot John Lennon, I shot John Lennon again and again and again and again.
I'll tell you what, why don't you send me the link to what you're talking about, and I will put it down below in the description box so the audience can take a listen. Because honestly, I have not heard that. So that's a new one for me. So I will also take a listen. All right. So just send me
Thank
the link.
you.
Yep. Very good. Very good. Send the link and we'll make sure that we get it into the description box. Well, Kaitlyn, this has been a fabulous discussion. I really enjoyed it. And you have an open invitation to come back anytime you want. If you continue your research and you feel like you've got enough stuff to put another 45 minutes to an hour together for a discussion, we'll do that. Okay?
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for contacting me. If you have any questions after the show, feel free to email me.
Okay, thank you
Okay?
so much.